$27, man, for teaching you how to dance, sucker.
This is Tunes here with Boogaloo Shrimp of Breakin and Breakin 2 Electric Boogaloo. Shrimp, how you doing today, man?
Fine. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Appreciate it. Such a great honor to be able to sit here, San Antonio, Texas,
Right on.
to interview you. So, first of all, what was your purpose here in San Antonio, Texas today?
Well, I came to support the hip hop community in by way of Texas. I mean, everybody has their factions: New York, Atlanta, LA, and their version of hip hop. And for me, I've seen the growth of hip hop a few years ago, slowly but surely, and I just came to kind of like reinforce my realism with nurturing businesses and families that are working in harmony to build a user-friendly hip-hop, dance music, no drama kind of thing. And especially too after the disasters that hit the other outside cities, I was like, you know what, maybe it'll bring a little inspiration, a little bit of joy, just for a smidget, it's positivity. So, it worked both ways. That's a very, very serious question. For the record, my biggest inspiration, I remember growing up in the 70s, and I don't really care about telling my age. It was hard being black in America. The television series Roots came out. Everybody thought that wasn't black. We're from Africa, a people, a species, a filthy being, something to be bondaged by. The music that was happening was kind of the movement of the 60s, James Brown, Fight the Power, and all this militant stuff, which was one group of people that revolted. So for me, I was like, wow, I'm a black kid trying to make his way in a world that only sees the outside, and you got to prove your character. So I had to make a conscious decision. What am I going to do to prove who the man inside behind the color is? I tried sports. I wasn't the Spurs. I wasn't the San Antonio Spurs. I wasn't Tony Parker. I tried track. I wasn't Jackie Owens. I tried everything to try to fit in and find my niche. Right after Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta changed my life. John Travolta was kind of Italiano. When that man hit that screen, I not only looked at him as a kid and as a African American minority, but I looked beyond him in the crowds. Everybody in there praised his dancing, and this guy he had his looks, he had his ambition, but he was broke. He was a painter, but you know what? He didn't care, and he walked with swagger, and I was like, wow. And he was the king of the dance floor. He even gave his money back from the dance contest, and I was like, wow, all that glory, and all he wanted was, respect and love at the end of the day. I was like, I'm loving it. Then when Grease came out, I was like, now John came back, and he's dancing again, but in high school, he didn't stay with the gang. His gang was like, they were all to mischief, and he was old Sandy. But the thing is, once again, he danced, he fell in love, he chose love over his friends. Those were my formidable years, so I was like, wow, you know what? I can kind of like mimic doing something right and not going to the negative and doing something positive. 1982, 1981, I said, wow. I started looking at television totally different. You had Soul Train. You had American Bandstands was still on TV, Dick Clark. And so I got a chance to see what white America was doing and African American minority America was doing, because Soul Train was a minority and Dick Clark kind of had a different and a more powerful spectrum. So I was like, okay, new wave, I got introduced to the music that was at the time. Dick Clark had a different song set, so did Soul Train. So when it was time for me to find my niche, I just said, you know what, let the music take me. And as I was listening to the disco beat, in the night. Oh, I mean, you could have played any disco song. It was just like Red Bull music. You're like, oh, I was tweaking just on natural rhythm. Like, oh, it was calling me, dude. I was like, I understand this. I was like, it was absorbing it. And then, I heard Thomas Dolby. Blinded me with science. And I understood it, and I was like, okay, and then more bounce. I was like, Lord forbid, I was watching The Bionic Man. Steve Austin. That sound. It was ticking to me. My dad used to call me Shrimpenstein. I was Jewish in my other life. He was like, I was the baby of the family. When he would get up, where's my Shrimpenstein, right? Because there was a whole Jewish thing. I think his manager was Jewish. So he made me, without the menorah, Jewish, Shrimpenstein. Where's my shrimp? So he called me Shrimpenstein because they were running horror films. It was October. Frankenstein was kind of like the OG robot. If you look at Frankenstein, he had the bolts. He was electric. Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It lives! And then he just came up and he just kind of like, without a snap, Frankenstein was like, oh. That was like the first robot. So my dad was like, he's Shrimpenstein. So then I was like, okay, my performance was this. Dad walked through the door, where's my Shrimpenstein? I would come out of the room like I was Frankenstein, but I was like a mechanical boy. So I gave my dad a little peace of mind from the 9 to 5 because he had stress. So I was like his little jig, his little gesture. That never changed because I wanted favoritism with my father. So as I was doing the Shrimpenstein, time was changing and other things were coming on. Like Star Wars. Darth Vader and Star Wars, Steven Spielberg changed my life. Because it really wasn't the stormtroopers, it was the cantina. R2. They didn't have the snap, but they were robots. There was actually a person in the suit. So now I had a different robot that was different than Frankenstein. So I started going, okay, domo arigato, Mr. Roboto, domo da 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 da. So I was like, oh, much respect to Toto. Here's the deal. So I started looking at television in a whole nother world because it was feeding me an art form that was not even on paper because it was in special effects. For the record, my style dancing is based on special effects, not math. That's why people could never figure me out because there's not anybody really that deserves the credit but special effects creations and people who are behind CGI and mocam and all those wonderful things that make Hollywood. So for me, I was always watching Ray Harryhausen, Clash of the Titans, Medusa, even before that, King Kong, the skeletons in Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts. I was always watching that, and I was like, wow, that was stop motion, courtesy of Ray Harryhausen and other people. Then I started watching cartoons like Tex Avery, and Bugs Bunny. So in animation, you would get real big. So I was feeding all this science fiction, and science fiction inspired me. Then when I seen certain dancers that had certain steps that added an illusion to the step, I was able to make my style based on what they didn't do. If they did one step, I did one step beyond because I was more into the science and the anatomy of what makes the move. It's like a science class. Science! That's why I like Thomas Dolby. There's a science to drafting, there's a science to engineering, and there's a science to dance. And so even as my journey became in 1982 is when I really started going into my personal studies of dance. I watched Shields and Yarnell. I watched Marcel from French. France. Marcel, he was an architect of lyrical, and he told pictures with his pantomiming. But he didn't really have to snap. He just kind of told a story. So that's why Michael Jackson and many people look to Marcel because it was a different art form, but it still was telling a story. So in my style, I adapted to storytelling. The broom dance was a story. I was sweeping, but at the end of the thing, it was a theatrical piece. People believe, wow, he's not just sweeping, but he actually made sweeping kind of beautiful. Janitors have a very lowly job. but I added music and I liked my job and I took it. Even if it was minimum wage, you just do things the right way. So I'm like the ultimate janitor. Much respect to all the people who want to sponsor me. Any of the companies, I won't mention any names until you give me a contract. But yeah, the thing is, I always was rooting for the brilliance and the underdog creations of my art. So for me, that was a question answered. That's what inspired me. Like, I want to give a shout out to director John Shue for the Step It Up franchise, the LXD. I want to give a shout out to every dancer on YouTube, Dubstep, Marquis Scott, Dragon House, Popping John, everybody, and yourself, Steve Rodriguez and the Spurs. Everybody who has been on the pioneering forefront to keep this art form going. Every sponsor, every company, every club, every event promoter who realize, okay, people who do this art form are happy, can sell product, but kind of like can bring stuff to the table. I want to give a shout out to everybody who show everybody that this dance form is here to stay and not a passing fad. So much love to you.
Again, Boogaloo Shrimp, tunes from Step by Step, Danielson Photos, Instagram, go follow. Thanks, guys. Shrimp.
Much love.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir.